Arman Tsarukyan is ranked number 1, okay? Whether he likes it, Ilia likes it, anyone likes it. If you want to do it on a merit-based system, Arman Tsarukyan is the guy. Simple as that.
Pathetic, honestly. So lame. It's 319 coming up. You know what I mean? He ain't fought since UFC 300, dude.
I think the main event of the December pay-per-view should be Ilia versus Arman. Arman has been out since UFC 300, dude. We need to get him back in there. But the reason that he's not the clear-cut, every single person is saying Arman should be getting title shot is because he pulled out of the fight against Islam.
UFC legend Michael Bisping didn't hold back, slamming the featherweight champ, Ilia Topuria, for avoiding the conversations when Arman Tsarukyan's name came up. Additionally, Michael Bisping questioned whether Ilia Topuria might be pulling a move similar to Jon Jones by potentially avoiding a dangerous contender like Arman Tsarukyan. Bisping emphasized that Arman is a serious threat to anyone in the division, calling him a tremendous all-around fighter.
This is where it gets interesting, because the question I'm going to ask is Ilia Topuria pulling a Jon Jones? Because Arman Tsarukyan is a real threat to anybody, okay? He is a tremendous fighter. I know a lot of people discredit him for pulling out at the last minute, and rightly so, okay? That's not a good look. However, he's a really, really good fighter. Simple as that. He can do it all. He's got the striking, the wrestling, the cardio, the strength. He's very young, he's in his prime, and the man's an absolute monster. Simple as that.
Moreover, Michael highlighted Ilia Topuria's controversial stance, noting that Ilia had claimed he would vacate the belt if the UFC forced him to fight Arman Tsarukyan. Bisping pointed out how Arman responded with a level of sarcasm and confidence, creating videos similar to what Tom Aspinall had done, featuring ducks to mockingly label his opponent a duck.
Ilia Topuria said if the UFC made him fight Arman Tsarukyan, he would vacate the belt. He doesn't want to fight him. He wants nothing to do with Arman Tsarukyan. So now Arman Tsarukyan's out there. He's making videos of little ducks.
Ilia, stop running, Ilia. Stop running, Ilia. Good boy. I'll make it quick, no worries.
He's doing a Tom Aspinall, taking a duck wherever he went with him. Remember that whole saga with Jon Jones and Tom Aspinall, which thankfully now is all over.
Additionally, Bisping compared this scenario with how Jones avoided Tom while Tom tried his best to make the fight. He states that this Ilia versus Arman situation is the new version of the Jones and Aspinall drama.
But now we've got a new version, okay? Now it's Ilia Topuria and Arman Tsarukyan. Arman Tsarukyan's even making a bet, offering him $500,000, $500,000 if he beats him, okay? Doing whatever he can to get the fight.
MMA Guru stated that neither Paddy Pimblett nor Ilia Topuria is ducking Arman Tsarukyan. He argued that if the UFC and Ilia have made it clear that Arman is not next in line, and Arman simply complains without taking another fight or proving his case actively, then the responsibility falls on Arman.
They're not ducking Arman. Why'd you get so lawyer for those two? I don't. When Arman Tsarukyan's told by the UFC that he's not fighting for a title next, and he's also, and the UFC tell Ilia Topuria that Arman's not fighting for a title next, and then he whines and does nothing if he doesn't get a title shot next, that's Arman ducking, whether you like it or not. Arman should have been called out Pimblett, hardline stance, title elimination bout, but no. Still crying like a fat that he is. Arman, I hope he gets slept out cold and dies in the cage.
Furthermore, MMA Guru emphasized that Arman Tsarukyan's #1 ranking holds no real value if he hasn't fought anyone in a year. He stated plainly that without staying active, there's no way a fighter should expect to get a title shot.
The same people wanting Arman to get a title shot are the same reason why the UFC has been lame as his #1 ranking means nothing. I know, if you ain't fought someone in a year, in over a year, if you ain't been in the cage, you ain't getting a title shot. End of discussion. I agree with you, Gabriel. Fight someone. I agree. I know it was Oliveira. I know it was Oliveira, and that's a really good win at the time that he got it. I understand. Arman Tsarukyan's last fight was April the 13th, 2024.
In addition, Guru pointed out that Arman Tsarukyan last competed at UFC 300, and now with UFC 319 approaching, his continued inactivity is becoming inexcusable. He criticized Arman harshly for not taking another fight, calling the lack of activity pathetic, and suggesting that if he's going to sit out this long, he might as well consider retirement.
UFC 300. It is currently, we're coming up to UFC 319. fucking pathetic, honestly. So fucking lame. It's 319 coming up. You know what I mean? He ain't fought since UFC 300, dude. Just retire, you ugly little button face.
Bisping added that while some might argue Ilia Topuria is just trying to get under Arman Tsarukyan's skin, the optics aren't great, and the situation would not reflect well on him. He stressed that as champion, Topuria should be facing the top contenders, especially someone ranked as highly as Arman. Avoiding that challenge, intentionally or not, creates a narrative that undermines the responsibility of holding the title.
Now, you could say that Ilia is only doing this to get under the skin of Arman Tsarukyan, but it's not a good look. If you're the champion, just like when John Jones was the champion, if you're the champion, you got to fight the interim champ, if there is one. If you're the champion, you're supposed to fight the number one guy. Simple as that. Now, yes, the UFC had their reservations, and yes, there's Paddy Pimblett that got in the cage, and yes, there is Justin Gaethje.
According to Michael Bisping, Ilia Topuria needs to accept the fight with Arman Tsarukyan because it represents the best possible matchup for him at this point.
So right now, he's got nothing but big options. Ilia Topuria needs to fight. He needs to accept the fight with Arman Tsarukyan. Because who's he going to fight? Is it going to be Paddy Pimblett? Arman's out there talking shit about Paddy Pimblett, saying that his last few opponents, if you combine their records, they've lost the last 13 in a row.
You gotta delete him from the rankings even. He's not even deserved to be in top 10. 3-0, 8-0, 2-0.
Oh, that's pretty bad when you put it that way.
That doesn't quite stack up, but I get the point that he's making. However, he's building his brand.
Furthermore, Bisping emphasized that because Arman is ranked number one regardless of Ilia's opinion, he must face Arman. That is, if he wants a merit-based system. Despite expressed interest in seeing that fight booked, Michael Bisping believes it might be Justin Gaethje who ultimately gets the title shot, as the UFC respects Justin and may consider his influence.
Arman Tsarukyan is ranked number one. Okay, whether he likes it, Ilia likes it, anyone likes it. If you want to do it on a merit-based system, Arman Tsarukyan is the guy. Simple as that. Now, if you want to ask me how this all plays out, I would like to say that Ilia Topuria fights Arman Tsarukyan, but I've got a feeling it won't be that. I think Justin Gaethje might just be the guy. I think he's the guy that gets to go up against Ilia Topuria. The UFC respect Justin Gaethje. He's been around for a very long time. He puts on nothing but exciting fights. Yes, he's coming towards the end of his career, and he's kind of digging his shoes in a little bit and then saying, hey, it's title fight or bust for me. And you know what? I think the UFC will give him what he wants.
On the other hand, Guru emphasized that Ilia Topuria is not ducking Arman Tsarukyan, arguing that Ilia had already set his sights on Islam Makhachev before Islam moved up a division. He highlighted that Ilia is out there finishing opponents and dominating fights, unlike Arman, who's had close decisions against fighters like Mateusz Gamrot and Charles Oliveira. According to Guru, Ilia's performances show a clear level of superiority and intent that Arman has yet to match.
Ilia is not ducking Arman whilst in pursuit of Islam Makhachev, who left the division rather than fighting him. He's not ducking Arman Tsarukyan, who went to a split decision with Charles Oliveira, so he can knock the out of Charles Oliveira in a few minutes. Who is Arman? Who are you guys talking about? Close decision with Gamrot, split decision with Oliveira. Ilia's knocking people the and dominating them. I'm bringing up Arman like people are ducking him, dude. What are people ducking? Dude, Arman's the real problem, but Ilia, Ilia's ducking him to move up to welterweight and fight Makhachev if he beats JDM. But Arman, Ilia don't want nothing to do with that, but he'll step up and fight Oliveira up a weight class, knock him the fuck out in a few minutes.
Coming in with his own take, analyst Bedtime MMA stated that the lightweight division is currently the most complicated in the UFC. With a stacked roster and a range of elite contenders, he noted that Ilia Topuria, as champion, has no shortage of high-caliber opponents to choose from. Bedtime emphasized that lightweight is overflowing with interesting and intriguing matchups, making it the division with the most potential for blockbuster fights.
Let's move on to the lightweight division now. This is the most complicated division, I would say. I would say right now the most interesting division with the most kind of like options for the champion to fight that are great fights, that are, intriguing matchups. I would say it's lightweight and I would say it's welterweight. So let's solve the lightweight division. The first question is, who is getting the next fight against Ilia Topuria?
Despite the number of contenders available, Bedtime stated that Arman Tsarukyan should be the one to face Ilia Topuria next. He emphasized that the UFC's December pay-per-view should be headlined by Ilia versus Arman, calling it the most legitimate matchup available. While he acknowledged Arman has been out of action since UFC 300, Bedtime argued that it's time to get him active again. Despite the inactivity, he firmly believes that Arman deserves the title shot based on merit and timing.
I think it should be Arman Tsarukyan in December. I think the main event of the December pay-per-view should be Ilia versus Arman. Arman has been out since UFC 300, dude. We need to get him back in there. But the reason that he's not the clear-cut, every single person is saying Arman should be getting title shot is because he pulled out of the fight against Islam. There's nothing you can do about it. And Dana White literally misspoke. And Arman did not miss weight for that fight. Dana White literally misspoke. He confirmed that he misspoke. Arman confirmed that he talked to Dana and he misspoke. The UFC doesn't even hate Arman Tsarukyan. They've offered him 2 fights. I really feel like Arman Tsarukyan should still get this title shot. He beat Charles Oliveira right after he beat Dariush.
Adding to that, Lucas Tracy expressed his view on Arman Tsarukyan's case, suggesting that Arman should take another fight, preferably against Paddy Pimblett, before getting a title shot. He said he'd still be excited if the UFC scheduled Ilia versus Arman now, but noted that the UFC usually doesn't follow that approach. Tracy argued that if Arman thinks Paddy isn't ready for a title fight, he shouldn't have any issue fighting Paddy.
So to expect the UFC to reward that is just delusional. And so Arman Tsarukyan should have to fight one more time. Listen, if they booked Arman Tsarukyan versus Ilia Topuria next, I would be happy about that. I'd be totally fine with that. But that's not the world that we live in. The UFC is not going to operate like that. And if Arman Tsarukyan is talking all of this big talk against Paddy Pimblett and he's saying that Pimblett isn't even that good, then why should you have a problem taking him on? If he's not that great, if this guy's a fraud, then you should have no problem beating him, right? And it's going to be a big fight. It's going to be a big fight. And think about it like this. If you beat Paddy Pimblett, that potential Ilia Topuria matchup gets that much bigger.
Further, Lucas Tracy argued that the UFC should aim to set up a fight between Arman Tsarukyan and Paddy Pimblett for a #1 contender spot. He suggested that this matchup would not only clarify the title picture, but also give Arman a chance to prove critics wrong, who claim that nobody cares about him.
And the UFC should want Arman Tsarukyan to take out a big name like Paddy Pimblett before booking him against Ilia Topuria, because the #2 argument against Arman Tsarukyan getting the Topuria matchup is that nobody cares about Arman. That's what Paddy says about him. No one cares about Arman, lad. And so, Paddy doesn't want to fight Arman because he views Arman as like the smallest name in the top 5, and that's why he wants to fight. If Arman beats Paddy Pimblett and finishes him or just has an impressive performance, that Topuria fight is that much bigger. If Pimblett goes out there and beats Arman Tsarukyan, you can't call Pimblett a fraud anymore. You can't bring up the fact that he's only beating old heads, because a win over Arman is a win over a guy that's like 28 years old, in his prime, as elite as it gets in the lightweight division as far as skill goes. So this is a no-brainer. You have to book this fight. You just have to do it. And
according to Lucas, this is the most logical path forward, especially considering that Paddy is targeting a fight with Justin Gaethje if he doesn't get a title shot, while Gaethje has stated he would likely retire if he is not next for the title.
Rufus, he wants to fight Justin Gaethje, who's got more fanfare. But Gaethje doesn't want to fight anyone else, so Gaethje's taken himself out of the equation as well. The UFC's not going to reward Justin Gaethje's behavior. And so the main point that I'm making is, if Arman wants to go into a Topuria fight and have that fight be massive, okay, if the UFC looks at Arman Tsarukyan and they're like, well, the Tsarukyan fight is like the 3rd biggest fight we can make with Topuria right now. The Pimblett fight is bigger, but Pimblett doesn't really deserve it yet. And obviously the Makhachev fight is the biggest fight you can make. I think it would make sense to force Arman Tsarukyan to fight a big name with a lot of hype like Paddy Pimblett. So if you beat Paddy Pimblett, again, there's going to be a crazy build-up to that fight. There's going to be a lot of trash talk.
However, Rampage Jackson chimed in with his thoughts, saying he'd lean toward Arman Tsarukyan if a fight with Ilia Topuria were to happen. Still, he didn't downplay Ilia's momentum, admitting that with the way Ilia's been performing lately, it wouldn't be easy to count him out.
Well, I'm with Arman. If they fight each other, I'm with Arman on that. But Topuria, man, it's just going to be hard to bet against that guy.
Of course.
Based off his last 3 fights and what he's shown here, his wrestling and his grappling.
But Rampage, you've seen so many different generations of fighters. You've seen so many different champions. Is he that different compared to other things you've seen, or is it just his time?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen anybody boxing so neat and so crisp and so tight.
Yeah, he's the best.
Yeah.
Here's the thing: he is a little bit smaller, and Arman is a bigger guy, and Arman's elite. So we'll get to see, like, I mean, I believe Topuria's wrestling is elite.
In addition, Chael Sonnen weighed in on Islam Makhachev's belief that Ilia Topuria was handed the pound-for-pound #1 ranking due to marketability. Sonnen pointed out that if the UFC truly wanted to make the fight between Islam and Ilia, they would have already done so, but he also acknowledged that at one point the matchup didn't seem likely, but now that both are in the same division, the fight is very much within reach.
Islam Makhachev said that Ilia Topuria was given the #1 pound-for-pound ranking for marketing reasons. They're trying to build a fight with Islam and Ilia. Okay. Now, and I had this debate, by the way. I had this debate with Daniel. And I simply said, hey, Daniel, if the UFC wanted that fight, they'd have made that fight. Like, there is definitely a landscape, and it does appear that we're approaching that landscape. It's very easy to envision a time where that is a really massive fight, but 2 months ago, it wasn't.
Moreover, Sonnen pointed out that if Islam Makhachev defeats Jack Della Maddalena, he will likely return to lightweight to face Ilia Topuria for the pound-for-pound top spot. However, Sonnen questioned the timing, wondering why the fight is being considered now when Islam had turned it down just 2 months ago.
Was Ilia officially a 55-pounder prior to or after the decision that Islam no longer was a 55-pounder? Now, as Islam tells the story, he's going to handle Jack and he's going to come back to 155. I would have a question as to why. Whatever stopped those two from fighting each other, what would be different then? And I'm well aware that the answer has laid within my question that it wasn't a big fight then and it would be a really big fight now. Like, I do understand that. But that would defeat the premise of the argument made by Islam. Islam is saying for marketing reasons, we moved Ilia up.
Adding to that, Chael Sonnen stated that if Islam Makhachev were to come back down to lightweight, he wouldn't be putting anything on the line, whereas Ilia Topuria would be defending his title. To counter the narrative that Ilia was given the pound-for-pound #1 ranking for marketing reasons, Chael argued it would have made more sense to keep Islam at the top. That way, if he returned to 155, he'd have something meaningful to put up in the matchup against Ilia.
But Islam would have that wrong. Islam does not have anything. Now, even if he is to gain a welterweight championship, if he returns to 155, he still doesn't have anything to put up. Ilia would be putting up the one and only title being contested. So if you were doing it for marketing reasons, you would keep Islam #1, so that when he comes to 55, he now has something to put up. Islam would have to put up the pound-for-pound ranking versus Ilia's putting up of a world championship. It's food for thought.
In the end, the debate around Ilia Topuria, Arman Tsarukyan, and the lightweight title picture reflects the chaos and intrigue that define modern UFC matchmaking. With Islam Makhachev hovering as a potential challenge and contenders like Paddy Pimblett and Justin Gaethje complicating the rankings, the division stands on the edge of a shakeup. So if you enjoyed the video, share your thoughts and opinions in the comments section down below. Like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a beat. And we will see you in the next video with more exciting updates.